Teamer Reclamation strategy on the play, John Martin.
Ooh, I got some words. About Teamer Reclamation. John Martin here, a man after my own heart. You can check out the deck list on the Cardboard Live extension. 2 copies of Ionize, that's the standout for me. That's a weird one. Along with 1 Spell Pierce. That's his protection against those mirror matches, effectively, or the combo-based decks. This deck looks pretty sweet, though, using Wilderness Reclamation, not with Nexus of Fate, but instead going for those big expansion explosions.
We have a number of Azorius aggro players in the field. Tom Ross, the lone player from a mono-white build of the deck, and he is curving out in this game. 2 Dauntless Bodyguards and a Hunted Witness to start.
Yeah, and this is a pretty solid start from the mono-white aggro deck, allowing Tom to apply basically max pressure with that triple 1-drop draw. Followed up by Banach Marshall here. That is a ton of damage, but Lightning Strike's going to save him a few points.
Yeah, still 5 coming across, though, and 2 on the previous turn. Martin's at 13 and no third land
drop. I know
drop.
those feels. I'm sorry, John. That's what happened to me when I played the deck. Sometimes you just miss your third land drop. I was playing 26. How did it go so wrong?
Got to find room for 27, I guess.
Yeah.
Legion's Landing for Tom Ross. Still 3 creatures. That's going to transform right away. 5 more damage coming across. Martin to 8.
Yeah, and it looks like Martin doesn't even have a removal spell, and no land off the top means that he's going to pack them in. We're already going side. What is happening?
Well, Tom Ross is winning. It's actually not that unusual.
Yeah, whenever Tom Ross is winning, the games are short. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Because he is sitting up in his chair, puts his leg underneath him, and when he does that, you know you're dead.
Tom Ross did have a stint at Wizards of the Coast not too long ago, but he is back in the trenches. When he started playing Tournament Magic, his first weekend back, it was a little rough. There was some concern that the boss was rusty. I think it's very clear at this point that is no longer the case.
Yeah, and he's basically back in form, playing the decks he loves to play. Whenever a Tom Ross deck is good in a format, he's going to excel. And right now, these white-based aggressive deck featuring Banach Marshall, History of Benalia are peak. And he's even chosen a different version here than, I would say, the norm. And 8-2 so far, and up a game here in round 11.
If you check out the What We Would Play column over on StarCityGames.com, I picked Azorius aggro as the deck that I would play. Just copy and pasted Hagen's list.
Smart.
And Tom Ross is playing mono white. And what I like about it is my concern is that at some point players will start to try to beat the white aggressive decks, and I think Settled Wreckage is an underplayed card in that regard. That's why the blue splash can be pretty important. You want your Disdainful Strokes, your negates.
Right.
But Tom Ross is just saying, you know what? People are still on Kaya's Wrath. People are still on garbage that you can beat anyway, and he's just going to play Unbreakable Formation, stick to just basic planes.
Yeah, and important to note, Tom actually going the full 4 copies of Tithe Taker in his main deck, a card that is quite good against red-based removal as well as counter spells.
Yeah.
And really just putting a hurting on these control decks. But on top of that, though, he has more 2-drops than normal. I think most players have agreed that somewhere around 4 2-drop creatures is the number you want to be, because you got to make room for Venerated Luxodon. You got to make room for Banach Marshall, but you also have to make room for a ton of 1-drops to make that Legion's Landing transform in a hurry.
And I'm glad you mentioned Tithe Taker as well, because that's a way that the mono-white build can push back against Settle the Wreckage.
Right. And Tithe Taker, I think, is just a very strong card that hasn't seen enough play, in my opinion. It seems like perfect for these aggressive decks, and we'll see if it has any real impact here against this Teamer Reclamation strategy. Mm-hmm. Notably, the Teamer Reclamation deck does play mostly at instant speed, but does a lot of that instant speed stuff on its own in-step thanks to the giant mana generation of Wilderness Reclamation.
And while the mono-white build doesn't get counterspells, Ross's sideboard has 2 copies of Demystify, which lets you fight over those reclamations.
Yes, the white spell pierce, as Tom Ross calls it. That's no joke.
That's great.
Yeah. Demystify is not one that we actually get to see too often, because there are usually better options. But for this mono-white deck with a very low land count, 1 mana to destroy an enchantment is all you need. There aren't a lot of artifacts running around right now, and that's usually the downfall of something like Demystify, is when the format contains a bunch of artifacts, and you need those sideboard disenchant-esque effects to be able to be a bit more versatile.
I believe Demystify was first printed in Urza block many years ago. You know, the enchantment block. So you needed to have enchantment hate.
Oh, no. Oh, no. I saw a thing. I'm pretty sure Tom thinks his opponent is on Teamer Drakes. or
Baffling End coming in is what you're saying?
potentially some Teamer Explore deck. I didn't see Baffling End come in. What I did see, Tom boarded out a History of Benalia, which is really good in this matchup. I think he also boarded in Tecatli Honor Guard, which is not very good in this matchup.
Yeah.
The 3 copies of Niv Mizzet are the only creatures in the main deck. And then the sideboard has like some Thorn Lieutenants, which, for one, I want to talk about that in a second. But as well as 1 copy of Rekindling Phoenix. John Martin, very smart guy. 4 copies of Thorn Lieutenant. The sideboard is so strong against aggro decks, especially the mono red decks, which can really plague a deck like Team Reclamation. All you need is time. And something like Thorn Lieutenant is a great way to put a roadblock in front of those early creatures because it has 3 toughness. But if they ever decide to throw a Lightning Strike or Lava Coil at it, you get a 1/1 that blocks as well. Just a really solid addition to the sideboard and something that I'm happy to see John Martin exploring.
Martin's game 1 plays were 2 lands and a Lightning Strike. That was it.
Right.
Yeah. Hard to really identify a deck off of that.
Yeah, and that's something, Tom is usually very good about figuring that kind of stuff out. But the way that these decks work in this format, there can be a wide range of decks that actually start with those 3 cards. Breeding Pool plus, Steam Vents or Stomping Ground, followed by a Lightning Strike, and just stalling out with no 2-drops and a bunch of 3s or higher. Ross can actually just assume that Martin had a handful of 3-drops. That's why he kept that 2-land hand. Unfortunately, there were no ops cast. There were no growth spirals cast. So Ross's ability to identify the deck from John Martin's side is not very high. But fortunately for Ross, even though he has quite a few bad cards in his deck for the matchup, this Reclamation deck, mulligan to 5, could be the death knell.
5 cards on the play, never really where you want to be. This is a deck that really needs to hit a lot of land drops as well.
Absolutely. We saw him stall on 2 lands last game, unable to really play Magic. And that's one of the benefits of playing the Bant versions of the Wilderness Reclamation strategies. You get to play Revitalize, a lot of cards like that kind of cycle and help you hit your land drops, also buying you time against these aggressive decks.
A couple Sulfur Falls to start from Martin as Ross's turn 1 play is a Hunted Witness. He has at least 2 more planes in the hand. We'll see what he has as far as a curve. There's Legion's Landing deployed in the second turn. Witness bumps Martin to 1. And there's a Bodyguard, but that gets hit by shock right away.
Yeah, it looks like Martin actually is kind of running on all cylinders. Finds his green mana for Thorn Lieutenant, puts up a few blockers, and has the removal spell to keep Legion's Landing from transforming. It's going to be an uphill battle. He's only got 2 cards in hand, but this is where the comeback starts.
Martin had the shock for that Breeding Pool to cast the Thorn Lieutenant. He is at 17. Ross does need to build up the battlefield a little bit more, though, and he has a couple plays, Tithe Taker and a second Hunted Witness.
Yeah, the downside is the 3 toughness from the Thorn Lieutenant means that if he wants to attack, he's going to lose a creature in combat and not really deal much damage to John Martin in the process. He's going to follow up the Thorn Lieutenant here with a Search for Escanta. That is a potentially powerful card that not only fixes his draws, but if the game goes long enough, if he finds a Wilderness Reclamation, could be the key to his salvation.
It's decision time for Tom Ross. His creatures right now don't line up great against the Lieutenant, though there's incentive to transform the Legion's Landing. And here's a big one. Benalish Marshal pre-combat, attack with everybody. That'll give him a first fort.
Yeah, and you're going to see a block here on the Vampire token. 7 damage is going to be coming through on John Martin's side. A bit of life gain from Tom Ross's side. And another follow-up here off of that Transform Legion's Landing, the 1-mana backup Legion's Landing.
So Martin will go to his turn. He's at 10 now. Rootbound Crag. There's 4 mana. What does he have for plays? Lightning Strike and Expansion. Okay.
Yeah, this is a great play here from John Martin. Notably one of the better uses out of the card Expansion. A lot of people use it as a means of copying something like Negate to counter a Negate and protect your combo pieces. But in a pinch against the aggro decks, you can use it to copy a Lightning Strike or a Shock and double up on removal. On top of that, it functions as one of your best cards when you have your engine going, and it's the perfect complement to a Wilderness Reclamation.
That takes care of Tithe Taker and Benalish Marshal. Ross will make that 1/1 Flying Spirit token. You see JD and Clomperon's Spirit entering the battlefield there.
Yeah, and Tidetaker actually putting Martin to the test, making him do it on his own turn, so Tom Ross actually gets that 1/1 Spirit and is able to attack with it this turn. Now, whether or not Tom wants to attack with the rest of the creatures is still up for debate, but that 1/1 flyer is going to come on over and put John Martin down to 9, and we'll see if Tom has anything other than activating that Adoptive First Fort for his turn.
It could be the situation where he's weighing, does casting spells actually do more than the first fort activation? There's a Baffling End in hand.
Well, that's
rather a Danto Vanguard.
Okay.
That's the play. And attack with everybody transforms that other Legion's landing.
I think getting the Danto Vanguard onto the battlefield is a pretty big deal, simply because it can attack freely through that Thorn Lieutenant.
Yeah, Dauntless Bodyguard, a Danto Vanguard added to the field. John Martin's going to put a Reclamation in the graveyard off of his search and just draws a Breeding Pool. He'll play that tapped.
That's unfortunate because that's the card you want to pair. That's the backbone of your strategy, but he's so far behind, he needed something to help dig him out of the situation, and a bunch of extra mana on the Wilderness Reclamation was not it.
There's an attack with everybody. Thorn Lieutenant jumps in front of Dauntless Bodyguard. 3, 4, 5, 6 come across. Martin to 1. Puts a Hinterland Harbor in the graveyard with the search. What's the draw? It's a shock. He'll target himself. Tom Ross is your winner, 2-0.
I'm going to go out on my own terms, okay?
Yeah.